Hello, I'm Brian Hubbard.
And I'm Lynne McTaggart.
And we are What Doctors Don't Tell You and Get Well. We're now in shops in the UK as Get Well, What Doctors Don't Tell You in the US, and with the latest podcast, vlogcast, with all the news that we think is of interest. And so without further ado, let's kick off. First item up, permanent hair dyes and chemical straighteners increase the risk of breast cancer by up to 60%. And this took place in America, the study, and they said that African American women are at special risk, especially if they use the hair dye every 5 to 8 weeks. The overall risk amongst all women is around 9%, but still quite substantial. Chemical straighteners too carry a breast cancer risk of around 30% for any women. The ones that get off the hook are the semi-permanents and temporary dyes that don't seem to have any sort of cancer risk at all. And it's a substantial study. It involved over 46,000 women. And so the people from the sister study are pretty confident that it is the permanent hair dyes and straighteners that are the cause of these breast cancers. So they're saying, look, there are many things going on in life. There are many, many causes of cancer, but this is yet another stress to the immune system. And that being the case, look elsewhere to colour your hair. And of course, people who are avid followers of Lynne will have noticed over the years that her hair has gone from a dark brown black to her natural grey. So obviously, Lynne, you read the news early.
I didn't just read the news. I actually started to get symptoms, not of breast cancer, but my voice started getting really congested. And of course, I partly make my living speaking, so this was a bit of a disaster. So I went to a naturopath we know, and he took one look at me and he said, "What are you coloring your hair with?" And I went, "Oh no. Yeah, it's permanent hair dye." And of course, the big culprits are the dark hair dyes, like I was using to match my natural color, which is dark brown black, basically. So with that, I decided to stop using it, and because my hair is short, it was pretty easy to grow it out. And I never looked back, and the throat thing cleared up. And presumably any breast cancer risk I've got now from the hair dye is gone. But here's the interesting thing, Brian. It is the dark hair dyes, mostly dark and red, which contain a nasty substance that is I think it's called a phenyldiamine, something like that. It's got phenyldiamine in it. And those are the products that really cause all manner of illnesses. They're very, very carcinogenic. They also cause all kinds of other things. So embrace your grays. I mean, that's what I've found, and it's very interesting. I found loads of my friends who are starting to go gray, deciding to go gray and to use their natural color, like it better. And I certainly do too.
It suits you. It suits you. I think it does. And I think what's interesting is that the researchers really were looking purely at the breast cancer risk. But of course, as you said, Lynne, there are many other problems, health problems associated with these permanent hair dyes, and you mentioned a couple of other ones, and there could be many more besides, because after all, it's chemicals racing around your body, isn't it? So any number of systemic health problems could result from using these dyes.
Absolutely. One of the big ones was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Well, I was about to say, which is a natural one, really, you'd associate with exactly that application of chemicals, and would expect to see that. Unfortunately, the researchers didn't check for that. They were just zoning in on breast cancer. But it seems that the risks start appearing after about a year of use, which is interesting. I mean, when did you start?
Oh, not till well into my 40s. And
but how long were you taking the dyes before you noticed symptoms of some sort?
Good 15 years.
Oh,
and then
right.
I just started to realize, I think it was around, I don't know, I think I probably only used the dyes for about 15 years. But in that time, my throat just got more and more congested. And I know other dark-haired people
And
are having the same issue.
I mean, of course, the people in the front line here, apart from people having it, are the people applying it too. And I mean, I don't know if they've done studies amongst hairdressers too who apply these dyes.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
And there's a big incidence of cancer among the colorists who use dark hair dyes.
Yeah.
And of course, the most famous instance of it was Jackie Kennedy Onassis, who is famously dark haired, dyeing her hair for years and died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Wow. So you have a choice, guys. You can either go natural like Lynn or bald like me. But don't use permanent hair dyes. Thanks, Lynn. How do you lose weight? Or more exactly, how do you lose weight easily? Because that's the $64,000 question for most people. How do I do it without trying? And, there are plenty of ways you can lose weight, of course, through exercise, eating sensibly, eating well, avoiding the high GI foods. There's loads of ways you can do it. But researchers reckon this is tough for most people, and the idea of exercising every day or following these diets is difficult for most folk, particularly those who already got health issues and problems as it is. And they say the way to do it is by actually just eating within a set time window. And for their particular experiment from the Salk Institute, they were looking at a window of just 10 hours in which you eat. So you have your breakfast on hour 1 and you have your last meal before hour 10, and then you fast for 14 hours, which sounds an awful lot, but of course that does include the 7 to 8 hours you're sleeping, and it seems to work rather well. They it's a very small study, I must stress, but it's an interesting one. Just 19 people who have what is known as metabolic syndrome, which is the early signs of type 2 diabetes. So blood sugar levels all over the place, insulin is badly controlled, and the next step from that is diabetes itself. So these 19 participants all took part in this 10-hour window of eating. And so they did this for about 3 months, and at the end of that they said, well, how did they do? Well, they did rather well. They're all reported sleeping better, and they all had a reduction in their body weight, their body mass index, their BMI, fat around the waist, all were down, as were the usual risk factors for diabetes and heart disease. Average blood pressure measures and cholesterol levels all reducing, as were blood sugar and insulin levels. They also fell. And they said this was such a simple, easy thing for people to follow. Eating within a 10-hour time window was doable. Most were able to do it. And what was quite interesting was they all actually ended up eating less as a result, because, it's quite a short window when you think about it, and they're not feeling terribly, hungry. So within that time, they didn't eat so much when they did sit down and eat. So, it was quite an interesting experiment, which worked very well. I mean, people have looked at this sort of thing before, calling it either the fast diet or whatever it might be. This is a variation on that theme, and it seems to work for all those who can't exercise, won't exercise, eat sensibly, and all the rest of it.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, in our latest issue, in our January issue, we have a diabetes special. And one of the ways to reverse diabetes, Brian, is this intermittent fasting, as they're talking about, with a big window between dinner and breakfast the next day. Now, you can do it other ways, too, where you delay breakfast or eliminate breakfast and start with lunch and then have a later dinner. But what we're talking about with you was, say, finishing your breakfast at 8 and then having dinner at 6 is basically that 10-hour window. And then that is what a lot of people do, actually. But they snack a lot after that. And that's the point, is to stop snacking in between. And to allow your body to go through that rejuvenation process by not having to deal with food. Because when we have food, everything focuses on digesting.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that is the point. I mean, they said the 10-hour window is important, but I really feel that the 14-hour period when you don't eat is even more important. The 14-hour fast, for want of a better term, is even more important. And when you think that, 7 to 8 hours of that you're actually asleep, it's not an incredibly incredible hardship. I think it's doable, and it seems to be extremely effective. And the reason why it's effective, the researchers reckon, is because it seems to tie in very nicely with our own internal body clocks. And it really is the point you were just alluding to, Lynn, that it seems to be the sort of like the natural tempo of the body is to eat over shorter periods and then fast. And I think you're right. But if you start snacking off that point, then you kickstart the whole process again. Even if it's just, something quite light, you nonetheless are starting the process. And the body just needs to rest for that period of time to allow it to properly metabolize the food.
I would say there's one other thing that the researchers didn't talk about.
Okay.
They didn't talk about quality of food,
No.
which I think is really important in terms of preventing yourself from snacking. One of the things that prevents that is getting rid of the fast sugars in your body. So the grains, the sugars, the refined carbs, all of those turn into sugar quickly, and the body craves them very, very, quickly. So you spike up and down, and that makes you hungry and want to eat. When you eliminate those, as you do with a paleo diet or a ketogenic diet, you aren't hungry. You have a good meal, you're satisfied with, the fats, with the protein, with the vegetables that you eat, and you aren't hungry, and you're more likely to sustain that fast period without snacking.
I mean, there are loads of variations on this, and there's no one particular way which is the best. I mean, what I've always done myself, again, following a similar idea, is that I always have 5 hours between meals, wherever possible. And then it's 12 hours, essentially, of fasting, mainly when you're asleep. But that seems to work too. And I think it's just a case for people, well, what does work, what's the best one for you, how do you feel comfortable, and just seeing what effects it has on you. And then if that's not quite right, well, play around with it. But I think you're right, Lynn. I think the thing that concerns me about all these studies is no one seems to look at actually what it is that you do consume, and that's so important as well. And it's almost as if that doesn't matter. So we're still going back to the old concept of the balanced meal, as if it doesn't matter what you eat really, or the quality of the food, whether it's organic or not, whether you're eating plenty of vegetables and fruits, all these things that matter, and in plenty of water, all these things really do matter. And it's surprising how researchers don't consider it at all. But I think that's another element, that's another important part of of that jigsaw.
Absolutely. And again, in this month's issue, we're talking about diabetes being also treated by a kinder, gentler ketogenic diet. So that's something that's a little closer to a paleo type diet. So again, it's really watching those and cutting out those refined processed foods, and that makes a huge difference when combined with the 5-5-12 system you're talking about, or the 10 and 14.
And just signing off, the researchers said that this simple change to your life could have a profound impact on public health systems. They were saying that if you could delay the onset of diabetes by even 1 year in people who already have the metabolic syndrome, which I say is a precursor of diabetes itself, that alone would save the American healthcare system $9.6 billion. And we got here in the UK or in the States, all these healthcare systems are under immense strain. And just simple things where people care about their diets more, eat better, eat sensibly, following the body clock, whatever it is, would profoundly change the stresses and strains on the healthcare system. Yeah, and even in the UK, they were saying that diabetes, type 2 diabetes on its own is enough to collapse the National Health Service. So, but simple things like this could easily be done by people. And I think if people start seeing the results and quite quickly, I think they would be more encouraged to follow this through more. And I think this is what this research does.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
Brian.
thanks, Lynne. Well, Christmas is coming, and so is 5G. Yes, the new mobile cell phone network is on its way, and it's going to be super power, super fast, super everything, really. It's going to be a complete change in the type and amount of mobile data we'll be able to download. And needless to say, all the mobile cell phone operators have been throwing billions of dollars and pounds at the regulators to make sure they have a slice of this extremely lucrative pie. And the trouble is, no one's seeing just how healthy or lack of health is going to do to us. What impact will it have on our health? No one's checking this. And, the voices are starting to come through about this. A lot of scientists are saying, look, stop this for a minute. We've got to check that this is safe for people. And because of the money, it's not happening. It's still being rolled out. No one is stopping. No one is checking. And there already were about 200 scientists around the world who've signed petitions saying, please stop. It's known as the precautionary approach. It's adopted by the EU, the European Union, who say, look, until we know something is safe, we don't expose the public to it, which is highly sensible. And because public health matters more than money, well, you'd think. And there's more voices joining this particular chorus, and the latest to join it is quite an eminent scientist who's also begun to specialize in cell phones and what they do to us. And he's come forward with what is quite an interesting suggestion. His name's Joshua Pierce. And he says, well, look, if you're going to have these cell phones and these masts all over the place, at least space them. Space them at least 1/3 of a mile from schools, from hospitals, and from densely populated areas and cities and towns, especially where there are blocks of flats or whatever you like, because it's just too dangerous to do otherwise. As he quite rightly says, I'm pro-tech, but I'm also pro-human. And once these things are out there, once the masts are up, there's no turning back. And, he's done some research. He said, look, the research is coming through now, which is suggesting that mobile phones are not always harmless, and that there have been cases of brain tumours, especially amongst people who use the phones a lot, and which suggests it isn't safe. And we do need to urgently stop and review this. And he said, look, even if you're not going to review it, at least space the cell towers out 1/3 of a mile, 500 meters away from schools and hospitals. And, as he said, because, these places, and it's the schools and the churches, these are allowing their roofs to be places where these cell towers are being installed because it's extra money for them. And you've got hundreds of kids right beneath that cell tower as a result, or, within a few yards of it. And, it really is a worry. And, there are a few cities around the world who've already actually put a halt to it, who want to do more research, who aren't happy, and their individual cities in America are doing the same thing. But overall, we're seeing this vast rollout, and especially in the States, well, I think actually everywhere, there isn't the planning guidelines in place that recognise this as a health concern. It's can't even be considered, and it can't be counted as you can't put a health claim against it and say, look, you can't put it up for this reason. They will not entertain it. The Telecommunications Act 1996 in the States and the various planning regulations in the UK do not recognise these as health hazards. And as a result of that, you can't appeal on those grounds. Well, I'm sure you could regale the listeners and the viewers, Lynn, with our own particular story on what we did.
Yeah, well, I have two things to say about it. One is when we were faced with a cell tower that was going to be built right outside our youngest daughter's window, essentially, we gathered together the neighborhood and we created what we like to call a housewife's brigade. And that is, we all took assigned roles about what we were going to do to create a protest. And we couldn't protest it on grounds of health. They won't allow that. But we did research to find out, Bryan did research about how it was, there were issues about pavement furniture, meaning if you have something spaced out and it's too wide, women with strollers, people in wheelchairs or with disability problems, etc., can't get by. So we argued it on those grounds. We also, our company printed posters and we stuck them around our neighborhood. Others got petitions and stood outside schools and churches to get people to sign it. Bottom line, our little ragtag team. We also invited one of the mobile companies that was doing this, that was going to have the cell tower, to a meeting of ours, showed them the posters and said, if you don't want this to be spread out even more, you'll stop this now. Bottom line, our little ragtag group stopped it. And we stopped it not once, but twice. So you can do that. We just bombarded our local council with this, and they finally said, enough, okay. However, I want to tell you a little bit about how this is going to be really difficult once 5G is here. Now, 5G sounds nice, like 5th generation, just an upgrade, like another phone from 9 to 10, for instance. It's not. It's completely different mobile technology. It's very different frequencies. Current 3 and 4G use centimeter frequencies. 5G uses millimeter, much shorter frequency waves, but also able to contain much more data. But here's the issue. With 4G and 3G, it's beaming out all the time. With 5G, it's waiting for a request from your mobile phone. And then it sends the data so that a movie, for instance, that takes 10 seconds to download will take 1 second, or 10 minutes to download will take 1 second with 5G. That's the good side. The bad side is, in order to pump out this information when your device requests it, you need to have cell towers every couple of feet, basically, every 3 to 10 feet. And with antenna, the current cell towers have about 10 antenna per cell tower. This will need hundreds. So you're talking about completely blanketing any given neighborhood with cell towers. And this is in addition to the 3 and 4G towers that already exist. So there's going to be, the idea that they're going to space it out is going to be really difficult. It's going to be health versus commerce, really clashing. However, the good news is that in our upcoming issue of What Doctors, our February issue has a step-by-step guide to keeping yourself safe from any kind of mobile technology.
I'm sure you remember being an avid tea drinker yourself, Lynn. A few years back, these amazing new tea bags came on the market, little pyramid-shaped ones, little mesh, fantastic, wonderful. I should go. The trouble was, what they didn't tell us was they're all using plastic to seal them. And guess what? When you pour hot water or boiling water on these tea bags, they release tiny particles of plastic and you drink it. And it's amazing. It didn't occur to anyone actually this was what was happening. So McGill researchers over in Canada decided to find out. They tested a number of these pyramid tea bags in boiling water and discovered that the average cup was contained 12 billion microplastics and 3.1 billion nanoparticles of plastic, which you are happily consuming. Now, these are specialist tea bags. A lot of organic tea bags, a lot of main manufacturers have become aware of this now, and they are stopping production of these plastic sealed tea bags. PG Tips, Lipton's, some Liptons still do it, a lot of Liptons don't do it. Teabags, pucker herbs, these do not contain plastic, but there are still some out there that do. And the World Health Organization, a couple of years back, made colossal headlines because they raised their hands in horror saying, do you know that a lot of filtered water in plastic bottles contains tens to hundreds of particles of plastic? Well, this tea, guys, contains 15 to 16 billion particles of plastic. What's it going to do to us? Well, nobody knows. But fortunately, people are waking up to this, especially the manufacturers. We're seeing now that they are slowly being withdrawn from the market, Lynn. So anything to add to that? A cup of tea, possibly.
Well, I think the most important thing is you have to start looking at your overall consumption of plastic. Plastic bottles, this kind of stuff, bisphenol A, just the plastics that absolutely saturate our lives. And luckily, we're starting to get much more savvy about it, Brian. I mean, we're talking about trying to limit and reuse plastic, plastic bags, et cetera, et cetera. We're understanding what it's doing to the environment, but we have to pay a little more attention to what it's doing to us, too.
Chicken soup, good for the soul. Absolutely, but you know what? It also stops malaria, and it's as good as the drugs you get. It blocks the parasite that causes malaria. Now, a whole range of traditional soups, some are chicken-based, some are not, but they all seem to have this ability to fight malaria. Isn't this something? Well, what happened was the researchers from Imperial University got together with a group of kids and said, bring in all those lovely soups that your mum makes, all the traditional soups. And I think in the end they brought in about 9 different traditional soups and they tested them. And they found that all of them had anti-malarial qualities to them. And they were just as effective as the drug. They slowed the growth of the parasite that caused malaria by more than 50%. And the researchers say, well, look, it's worth keeping in mind that lots of natural remedies actually do work, even down to traditional soups. And as the lead researcher Jake Baum said, we have to look beyond the chemistry shelf for new drugs, and natural remedies shouldn't be off our watch list. So soup, Lynn, it sort of fights malaria.
Not surprisingly.
Okay.
Not surprisingly. Remember, for generations, chicken soup has been called the Jewish penicillin. And it's because it's traditional in the Jewish families to make homemade chicken soup, homemade matzo ball soup with a chicken base. And if you think about chicken soup, beef soup, whatever, those kinds of traditional soups, they're not made with a stock cube. They're made with bone broth. That means that the mom, the grandmom, is boiling away bones for hours. And that releases all kinds of fantastic things, substances from the bones of the animal, and collagen and all kinds of fantastic elements that are then in the broth of the soup. So this is considered the ultimate kind of food to have to prevent osteoporosis, to heal the bones, and to make bones stronger. And it's also obviously really good for other things too.
Yeah. Well, look, guys, that's about it this side of Christmas. And so you know what to do with the bones of the turkey now, don't you? Turn it into a fantastic anti-malarial soup. But in the meantime, have a fantastic and wonderful and peaceful, restful Christmas. And even more important, have a very healthy 2020. And we'll catch up with you in the new year. So in the meantime, Bryan Hubbard wishing a very happy Christmas.
And Lynne McTaggart, happy holidays, including using chicken soup, whatever religion you are.